Hello everyone, today is Thursday, August the 23rd, 2018, and I came out to the fair early so that I would have some nice quiet time so I could record Short Story Thursday. And like they do so many times, they have opened the gates early, and so I have found the most secluded place I could, but there's still going to be some sounds around me you're going to have to put up with. Like they're doing a sound check on the sound stage over there. It's just, everybody's really anxious to get the day started, I guess, but here we go. They're opening everything 2 hours early. Let's go ahead and get started with Short Story Thursday. Today's story is going to be about an old friend of mine named Chester. Now, Chester was not born. Chester was built. He was created by an old guy named Alvin. The year was 2008. Alvin worked at a place that tried to recreate colonial life as closely as possible, and he was put in charge of a big vacant area that really desperately needed something colonial to fill it in and draw people's attention. So Alvin decided to build a very authentic windmill. He really went old school, cutting the trees down, splitting them into squares himself, hewing everything out, and putting everything together as closely as he possibly could, according to the painstaking research that he had done. The result was Chester. Chester was only about 10 foot by 10 foot if his turbines were completely removed, and it was just him on his swivel base. Now, a swivel base was there so that he could be turned to point into the wind from whichever direction the wind came from. He was very well built with sprockets and shafts and millstones and turbines and belts and everything put together and completely functional. But there was only one problem, and it was that Alvin had built Chester in the middle of a wide open field with trees all around it, and the wind could not get to him. Chester was happy with the way he looked. Chester was happy with the kids that could come and turn him into any direction that he wanted, and he was happy that he was a functional and well-built windmill. But Chester was very, very sad that the purpose he was built for, he was not able to perform. Alvin's managers were very happy with the job he had done, and they knew that this windmill, completely motionless, could last for years because it was not going to get anywhere. For a couple of weeks every year, when all the trees had lost their leaves and the fall winds were blowing through the field, he could grind some bags of grits, some bags of flour, cornmeal, and it was really a wonderful time for him. He could feel the gears on his insides rumbling and moving and churning, and he felt productive. It felt like he was doing what he was built to do. And so for those few weeks every year, there was a big festival when people would come and they would get their grits and their cornmeal, and they would have oatmeal and grits and cornbread and flour covering tables, and they would celebrate the fact that Chester was fulfilling his purpose as a windmill for those 2 or 3 weeks out of the year. But this made Chester very sad. He knew that he could live to be hundreds of years old because he only got a couple of weeks of use every year. There was not going to be a lot of wear. There was not going to be screws and nails rumbling out of their sockets. There was not going to be hard to find parts that had to be changed out. There was not going to be worn out sprockets or shafts or regular motor oil changes for the most of the year. For as long as he could remember, Chester would remain motionless and sad. Then one day, he noticed that Alvin, his hair had turned gray, and he was up late into the night, slowly walking around Chester, staring at him, thinking, staring into the sky, looking back at Chester, late into the night. For the next few days, Chester started noticing that Alvin was bringing guys in suits, guys in khaki pants and collared shirts around him and looking at him and discussing and discussing and discussing. Chester was actually a little bit worried. He kind of felt like something big was about to change, but he didn't know what it was. A few days later, he figured it out though. A big flatbed truck showed up at his site. It was lower down, the ramp was lower down, and he felt large straps and ratchets closing around his base. And he felt all of his turbines being removed, and he was tilted over, put on rollers, and drug and drug and drug until he was entirely on the back of the flatbed. It was then raised level, and Chester was on the road. He was moving. He was going somewhere. Next thing he knew, he was being unloaded once again. The same ratchet straps pulling him the other direction. His base being put back on a part of the ground that felt as though it was prepared for his arrival. And he was raised into place, his turbines put back in place. He took a look around and realized he was now on a hilltop with lots of horizon in all directions and no trees anywhere. Already his turbines were in motion. The shaft was not engaged yet, but he knew that Alvin had finally understood that the price of long life was not worth it to go the entire time unhappy and not worth being able to fulfill the purpose for which you were created. Alvin was there at his base, looking up at him, wrinkled and gray-haired, and smiling as Chester's turbines spun around and around and around. And that is it. That is all for this week's Short Story Thursday. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. If you did, please don't forget to smash that like button. Leave comments, leave questions, leave suggestions, leave requests. Share this video around. Subscribe if you haven't already, and ring the bell icon to start receiving notifications of all my future updates. I love you all very much, and I will see you again in the next video.